Right, I've got that speakers list filled. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Overview Management and Scrutiny Committee meeting for the 4th of December. Can I just remind you all to mute your phones so we don't get any interruptions. We are now live, I think. First order of business, are there any declarations that need to be made regarding today's agenda? Sorry, Councillor Sam.
Thank you, Chair. We've got the white ribbon decoration. Is that what you mean? The
You want to make a declaration regarding
white ribbon?
Sorry?
Is it a declaration of interest, Councillor Sarah?
No, sorry.
Right, sorry. Okay. In that case, we'll move on to the minutes of the last meeting, 13th of November. Are we all happy with those? A correct record? Yes, thank you. In that case, we'll move on to the asset rationalisation programme report. So, Councillor Lee, welcome back, Councillor Lee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and it's a pleasure to be here this morning, and nice to be on this side of the table, although unusual, but thank you for that. It's my sort of pleasure just to introduce the asset rationalisation agenda item, which is a really critically important one because it's often something working in the background, and it's actually demonstrating that the report, I think, amazingly good progress in progressing this particularly important subject. So obviously my colleague James Tim will go through the detail of this, but there's a long programme here that obviously has been accelerated in recent times, which I think really does demonstrate a good response so far. So I'll leave it to James to go into the detail, but happy to answer questions if there are any, if I can help afterwards. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. As you say, I've been asked to be brief because I know you've got a meaty risk agenda to go through. So I've ditched the presentation and I'm just going to provide a brief overview for you. So the report covers the asset rationalisation programme that's been ongoing, which focused on streamlining the council's property portfolio. What it looked at was reducing the number of properties with high maintenance liabilities, consolidating services in multi-purpose hubs, enabling agile working through reconfigured office accommodation, creating opportunities for is that not working?
Can you pull your microphone a bit closer, James? Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll go back to the beginning then. Reducing the number of properties with high maintenance liabilities, consolidating services with multi-service hubs, enabling agile working through reconfigured office estate, creating opportunities for shared occupancy with partner organisations such as the NHS, ambulance service, DWP, etc., generating capital receipts and primarily reducing revenue costs, and hopefully to end up with a fit for purpose, financially sustainable portfolio that will support modern service delivery. The target was to get £2 million revenue savings from the programme as a whole. We're forecast to deliver 3.2 when the remaining vacant properties are sold. And essentially that's in a nutshell what the report's saying. It covers the utilisation levels at County Hall in particular, because you'd asked for that. So I guess the question is what happens moving forward. We continue with an asset review process looking at our remaining estate. We respond to the changes that are happening across the sector in health and in the public sector, and we make sure that our estate is in a shape to be effective for that. And that's it really.
Thanks, James. I think the first thing we should say, thank you for the summary, but it's a very good result to have delivered 3.2 million in savings over and above the target of 2.5, and the capital receipts as well. So a very good report on last year. The challenge, I suppose, really is where do we go from here? We've got an estate of 363 million, but there's limited opportunities for disposal. Is the major opportunity going forward to sweat the assets we've got through sort of rental income, etc., rather than disposal, would you say?
At the moment, that's what we're looking at, sweating the assets. We're looking at very much working with partner organisations, including the community sector, because they can help us in terms of our asset costs in particular. And again, there's the challenges moving forward as well in terms of the reduced budgets that we have to retain, to look after the estate that we have retained against increasing costs. But there will be opportunities, and we keep the portfolio under constant review.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of getting rid of assets and sort of reducing these overheads, within my ward, I'm sorry to be parochial, we have an example where we've got a warden's property which is not really being used, and the parish council repeatedly have been trying to get access to that facility because they don't have a village hall, and yet every time they try to make a move on it, it's blocked.
Which particular one?
It's in the close in Leven, and the question I've got is, if we're trying to strip these things down a bit and get them off the books, if you like, to save money, is there any other mechanism in place to do this? Because these are real opportunities where buildings can be put into use.
Yeah, that might be is it a housing? Is it part of a housing estate, that particular one? It may be a housing community room, so it hasn't come through. But yeah, if it comes to me and there's an opportunity to get rid of something, definitely. So if you can just send us the particular details of that one, because that's maybe sat in the housing portfolio, but it still needs to be dealt with.
Okay, Councillor Phoenix, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was quite interested in the bit about home working, and I understand, obviously, since the pandemic, everything changed after that. I completely understand that for many people, home working is a real benefit, and also it cuts down on things like climate change with travel and stuff like that. But I just wondered what is the vision for this? Because obviously, if we say, okay, we're going to get rid of buildings or places, offices that we don't need, is that going to be the permanent vision? Because obviously, if things change again, for example, if people find that working from home is not good for their mental health, and we start having lots of problems like that, will that then be too late if we've disposed of all those possibilities of coming back to the office? Thank you.
Okay, so some of the space is leased out to third sector parties. So there is an opportunity if our needs change when that lease expires to move back into that space. Well, that's ultimately it's a question for the organisation in terms of how they want to manage their staff. But we will always, the current plan is to have office spaces in our key settlements, Brid, Beverley, Goole, etc. So we've currently got office spaces across the authority in our key towns, Brid, Beverley, Goole, and a smaller space in Driffield. So there's always somewhere for somebody to go. We previously had drop-in spaces as well in all of our multi-service centres, but they were not well used. People tended to concentrate in the bigger areas. So to answer your question, if we've sold it, yeah, we've got a problem. But we've got flexibility in the future where we've leased it, and on this site in particular, we're leasing.
So does that need to be formulated into an actual policy then would that make your life easier if it was, or
Well,
not really?
Not really, because things are always changing, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, there's still capacity on this site anyway. We've reduced down to about a third of our previous footprint.
Okay.
And working practices may go even further, and it may be that we've got even more space, so we're looking for more space to rent out.
Yeah.
We've just got to be responsive.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Walker then, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, since the market has probably decided now that there isn't a great deal of point in getting rid of many of these assets. It's just not an opportune moment, is it? But those that we are retaining, are you content that they are in their best sustainable state, so that those that we do keep have the minimal, for instance, energy usage within there? And have we been able to find any external funding to make sure that they are, please?
Yeah, we've been pretty successful in terms of getting external funding for energy measures. We were one of the first in the country to roll out the PV, so we were getting full feed-in tariffs on those, and we've extended that to every particular roof space that we can fit that on our estate. We've got external funding for heat pumps as well, insulation. So you know, from the funding that comes from DESNZ, we're always getting as much as we possibly can. Moving forward, whether there's going to be any more or a significant amount, sort of a question, because that seems to have dried up at the moment. But we do need to continue to do more, particularly in places like this, which are very difficult to heat and to insulate.
Is there anything that you need us to do in terms of policies or nudgings that can help in that direction?
I don't think so, really. I think we're pushing in that direction. We're always pushing in that direction. There is a bit of a conflict between carbon and cost, though, which we always need to balance, because cost is probably taking the primacy at the moment over carbon. Until the technologies sort of match, we'll probably err on the side of cost at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jeffries, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions, if that's okay. The first is, when the offices here were cleared because they weren't being used, did you get sufficient money for the selling of the desks and the chairs and the rest of the office equipment? Because there was a huge amount, question one. Question two, with the hub, that was originally going to be a place where we could get hot food, etc. That now is barely used. Do you consider that to be a worthwhile asset? Or can you develop it into what it was originally going to be for the benefit of all of us working long hours here?
Okay, so in terms of the hub, the point that was introduced pre-COVID, and it was providing a service with hot food similar to the thing that we had previously. When the numbers reduced, it wasn't financially viable. There just weren't the numbers there, so the service couldn't provide that subsidy, and that was a decision that was taken. So the vending machines were put in. The offer wasn't great, so the vending machines are supplied hopefully with a better quality of food at the moment. In terms of the long-term aspiration, if we get this site fully occupied with other public sector partners, it may be that becomes a viable business, and that would be the hope. But it's about having enough business, really, because we are also in the centre of Beverley, and Beverley businesses want our cash as well. And in terms of the furniture, well, the furniture was disposed of in accordance with the council's procedures. I think they initially tried to sell that furniture that has got a value. There wasn't a lot of value in a lot of furniture because a lot of people don't want massive desks. Then it was offered to schools, and then after that it was offered to the charity, and then what's left is either sat in a building over there or disposed of. People don't want big old desks anymore.
Councillor Jeffries, are you happy with that? Yes.
As happy as I can ever be, thank you.
Good. Thank you for making today, because I know it was a last minute substitution. So thank you. Councillor Holtby, please.
Yeah, thanks. I've just got three quick things. In terms of shared development, if we sell a site off to a big developer, or either in terms of houses or whatever, do we ever look at doing any shared development so that we don't just simply get the sale price of the product of whatever we're selling, but we also get an enhanced value as the site is developed? Yeah,
there's usually clawback in terms of if they get a planning approval for residential or something in the future, which wasn't the basis upon which we sold the development, so we would get a clawback on some of that enhanced value. where the opportunity exists, that's part of the sale.
The second one, there's a sort of move towards big AI centres. Is that something that we've been able to look at?
Well,
Is that a possibility going forward?
I've got Andy here. He might want to answer that one.
Yeah, thanks. So yes, yeah, I mean, you'd be familiar if you're following the news at the moment, there's huge opportunity in this space. We've got active conversations with sort of data center providers at the moment to come to the East Riding, but yeah, there's positives and negatives to those types of investments. As you've seen in the press recently, the nature of the amount of power consumption that these centres run is quite topical at the moment. That said, we're in a great position in the East Riding for a much greener type data centre type investment, and we have a lot of renewable energy in the East Riding. So we have this thing called energy symbiosis. We've got quite a lot of a unique mix of green energy, and it makes us very attractive for that. So some of the conversations, certainly that I've been involved in with one potential investor, was in that space. It's a very much a green powered data centre. So great opportunity. There's a great linkages then from what do you do with some of the waste heat. So for the food and production, you can do a lot with that waste heat into growing, and so yeah, really exciting opportunity in that. But we just need to step through it carefully and do it properly.
Thank you. Thanks for that. And finally, just to be a bit parochial, like Councillor Smith, Scurler council offices. It's not on this list of in the appendix, but I just wonder where we've got to with that, because it's a big property, isn't it? It's owned by the council, which is just sitting there doing nothing.
It's on the market. It's been advertised for sale. It is actually on the market finally.
And is it being sold as is, or with planning for
It's being
turning into something more than what it is?
It's being sold as is for a developer to get the planning with the arrangement that you described earlier.
Thank you. I did see a big for sale sign outside of it this morning as I drove past. So it is actively being marketed, but it's an unusual building for someone to take on, isn't it? Maybe residential, I don't know.
There is a nuclear bunker underneath it.
Sorry, James.
There's a nuclear bunker underneath the.
All right. Okay. Oh, great. Well, we might need one of those. Councillor Sarable, please. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. I've got a couple of questions, but probably towards the future. So one is, what is the contingency plan if this revenue that we're projecting by this proposal will save, it's fall short?
We've got that, but that's what we've got. That the revenue reported is what we've achieved.
Okay.
So.
And also for the future proposals, what criteria will you add based on the things that is gone with the current one?
For the future, what
I mean, future disposables or leasing or selling probably.
Yeah. So I think a lot of it's about looking at where we provide and how we provide our services and making sure that the buildings that we've got are in the right location. And in terms of the ones we've got left, we've obviously got a big campus here, and we could potentially, once we've settled on our footprint, we could do different things. And then we've got opportunities with adults, children's and libraries around doing things with the community sector. And I think that's an opportunity that we could explore a little bit more. Maybe not big savings, but definitely will improve service delivery.
Sorry, Chair. So if it comes to the future plans like this, will it be a consultation between the councillors and different people to come with the ideas? Because I have few ideas, but maybe open for future.
Come and speak to me. That'd be brilliant.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Healy, please.
Thanks. Can I ask you how many properties or assets are subject to peppercorn rents off other partner organisations like town councils, for example? And what's the strategy for that? I mean, I'm conscious that there are some parish councils that have peppercorn rents, and yet when Beverley Town Council showed an interest in the customer service centre, it's commercial rent. And I just wondered what kind of strategy is for that, and if we're giving stuff away,
Right.
Is that right? And
Okay.
you're looking to recover some of those assets that we are currently, so we have a consistent approach.
We definitely have a consistent approach. So some of these will be, well, I don't know the number off the top of my head, so I'll have to come back to you on that. In terms of the peppercorn rents, some of these are legacy from many years ago. So the sports fields maybe, and the reason for that, I'm guessing, or the reason that the rationale around it now is it's about getting market rent. So if there's no viable alternative use, and there is some sort of community value being provided, then peppercorn rents or rent below market value can be considered, and that's in the council's policies. So I think the particular property you're talking about has a market value.
Yeah, my point really was that there seems to be inconsistencies. I know, I understand the legacy argument, but it's currently sort of market rent, and whether there's an opportunity to recover some of these assets and sell them, where we're offering historic market rent as to generate more revenue.
So when a lease comes up, we review that position entirely, because my objective is to get more money.
Okay, I think Councillor Meredith had a wiggle on this one.
Thank you, Chair. And just to say that Councillor Hilly's brought up an interesting point, actually. In Brough, the Town Council has a peppercorn rent for half of the library community centre area, but it is because it put 300 grand into the building of it. Yeah. And so you will find there are incredibly exceptional circumstances. And so I suppose the question really on the back of Councillor Healy's is what's the standard strategy and what's the exceptions test as well? There's two lenses to look through this. And I did have another question, Chair, but I won't push in on that one. I just wanted to come in while the mic was still hot after Councillor Healy.
Sometimes it's probably a mechanism to get funding where the council has to stand behind an organisation like that. They probably paid for the construction. They needed someone just to be holding the head lease. And that's why some of these agreements exist. But if you need the numbers, I can dig it out.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Meredith, you haven't spoken yet apart from that wiggle, so if you want to ask a question, please do.
I think the chair's trying to get the pain out of the way by doing it all in one go. So firstly, having read the report, I just wanted to say congratulations on going beyond the figures that were achieved. I think that's something as a committee we should commend. However, the reason I bring that up specifically, not only because it's noteworthy and commendable, but also because I'd like to use this opportunity to urge caution, Chair. We've seen plans historically to sell sections of Lord Roberts Road car park and turn it into housing. And I've come in today and it's 90% full. And it's a random wintry Thursday. It's not even a full council day. And so what I'd say is that the actual removal of assets, brilliant, done really well. Thank you, stop. But also, if you look at the report, Chair, if we go right to the very top, it says so the Council's Strategic Asset Rationalisation Programme is aimed at improving the efficiency, sustainability and value for money of its property portfolio. I'd say that third box has been ticked off with aplomb, but in terms of actually sweating our assets, in terms of, for example, investments in energy infrastructure, Hull City Council applied for, where are we? Sorry, I'm flicking between two different documents here, bear with me. The Sustainable Carbon Energy Fund and got £5 million for underfloor heating to go from Guildhall into other buildings as well. And that's saving a couple $100 grand a year and 3,400 tonnes of carbon. So are these the kind of things that would be the next steps?
We've already got funding from the same fund for a network in Goole. We've got £11 million for that.
That's twice as well as Hull. Doubly
but the problem is financial viability. It's easy in Hull where you've got lots of buildings close together with off-takers. We're a rural authority and we don't have such a concentration. So we can get the funding in and we can write great bids, but when it gets down to the financials, that's where it gets a little bit tricky. And we're not going to, as I said earlier, just take on a green project that leaves us in a financial deficit. And I'd like to see Hull's figures anyway, because I'd reckon they're paying more for the electricity after they've done that than they were before.
Doing things better than hold share is no surprise, and really the sort of the ethos of my question, or sort of the underlying sentiment, was that there seems to be a multi-pronged set of points for officers in the asset rationalisation strategy, and the weighting seems to have been very much towards the releasing of assets rather than the enhancing or the improving or the efficiency improving of them. And I was just wondering if this was a sort of a phased process, if it was step by step, if it was a low-hanging fruit first. In short, I was wondering how the balance has been struck and if it's going to change.
So it was originally, it was about optimization of assets, because we had a lot of underutilized facilities across the authority. There's an opportunity to bring services together to improve delivery, so that allows our assets to be sweated a little bit better. At the same time, we're always looking at opportunities to improve the performance of our existing estate. The opportunity to invest in new things, in maybe more appropriate locations and more modern buildings, because a lot of our estate is aging now. That is subject to the capital bidding process, and we need to obviously think about beyond the next 2 or 3 years. We probably will need to start investing again in things.
Go on.
Just how do you prioritise then between statutory services? So, for example, brown bins have to be collected now every week, not every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So there'll need to be investment in new depots because we need to store more bin wagons, versus things like improving leisure provision, which isn't a statutory service, but is something that residents would want more if they were given the choice. So how do you balance between the obligation and the desire, aside from doing what you have to and then what you want?
Well, we used to have a capital bidding process for these proposals to come forward when we had capital funds available. At the moment, we're just managing what we've got. So
Content?
Not as content as Councillor Jeffries, but I'm close.
Councillor Smith wanted a second bite at the cherry.
Thank you, Chair. I want to talk about this building we're sitting in now. I've been elected here about 2.5 years.
Yep.
I've lived in Beverley 20 years. I understand the importance that when I first moved here, the volume of people that were working here and the important part they played on the local economy, because at the time I ran a local business in the town. So going out and buying sandwiches, shopping, all of those things. We see even by your own report, the numbers of people that are here, working here now has dropped like a stone in a pond. It's near the bottom. We see that we're trying to bring other people in, but we know we're nowhere near that occupancy. So that economic benefit's gone, really, for the high street. So then we look at this building and it's difficult to heat. It's difficult to maintain. In the whole time I've been here, all I've heard is banging, crashing. It's a wonder they're not out there today with a pneumatic drill. When we sit in full council, they're fixing the roof. When I'm listening to Councillor Meredith talk and I'm looking at the beautiful ceiling in the chamber, absorbing these sounds, I'm looking at the damp and the paint peeling. I mean, put bluntly, this is not fit for purpose in 2025. We come from right across the East Riding as councillors to travel here. I hear from my colleagues in Bridlin and it takes them a long time. We've got facilities like the Ergo Centre where I go for other meetings, where we have rooms like this with all the technology, easy accessibility, easy parking. Why do we continue with this building apart from historical value and tradition? Because actually it does not suit the modern world. And if I was being totally pragmatic and business minded, I would just turn my back on this place and either sell it off, cut it up, turn it into housing, turn it into a shopping centre, whatever, and move all of this to somewhere more central. I'm just wondering, do you look at that as a potential going forward?
Always, to be honest. Always. We ask that question periodically. Last time it was asked, the objective was to try and stay in the centre and try and get more people and more footfall. We have to look at what our business is going to look like moving forward and how many people are going to be working here, and then take and ask that question again. And also, we're going to need to, if we were to move, you need to look at where, how big, and how much is it going to cost to do it. So those sorts of things, those questions will get asked again.
So
Yeah.
just follow up to that. I mean, when I go and have meetings at the moment, so I'm going to go and meet highways. I'm off to meet at Mannery Road, not here. If I need to have other meetings, we've got iPads and technology. I don't know what the energy bill is for this building, but it frightens me. And I just don't understand why this vast site is still in operation. I'm staggered by it, if I'm truth be told.
Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. I think Councillor Lee wants to come in on that.
I wiggle on that if I may, please, Chair. I think you've answered past the question a little bit earlier on. I think we are a responsible organisation. We do provide a lot of business for the town. I think that's not a singular reason to stay here, but I think it's certainly true that geographically Beverley is at the centre of the East Riding, broadly speaking. You're never going to get anything perfect, but we are pretty central to those in the south and the north, and clearly we are fairly accessible. And you, as you know, you've got parking a facility here. I think the point is, as James has indicated, this is a movable feast. Constantly every week, I'm sure that assets are being reviewed and assessed, and making sure that we actually do make a strategic plan to ensure that we get the best out of our properties. It may well be in time, I'm sure, maybe beyond all our times here, that this asset here isn't fit for purpose. But I know quite a considerable amount of investment has gone in here. This meeting room is a pretty classic example of pretty good technology and good investment in the last 2 or 3 years. And I think we will constantly do that, I'm sure, to ensure that we are fit for purpose here. So I think it's a good point, but I think these are assessed on a regular basis to ensure that we do maximise what we can do out of each property we have.
Thanks, Councillor Lee. Go on.
Sorry, just to respond to that, I understand where you're coming from, but ultimately I'm sat here and my responsibility is to the taxpayer, okay, and offering value for money. And I hear what it is we're trying to achieve here, and I know it's a difficult conversation, and I know the people on the other side there, some of them are upset by what they're hearing, but the truth of the matter is, it's obsolete for its day. It's seen better days, and it needs to go.
That's probably the same for all of us.
Noted.
I know Councillor Sarabal wants to come in, but can I just ask James, has there been a report to look at relocation at any recent time?
I think when we looked at this pre-COVID, we looked at this, and we looked at the development options, and we looked at our need. We mapped where all of our staff were living and where they worked. And in terms of location, when we looked at it last time, this was the optimum location based on the size of business that we thought we were going to have. We will obviously continue to look at it again, but when it was looked at, this was the location, because there are lots of stakeholders.
Thank you, James. Councillor Sarabal, do you have a...
Thank you so much, Chair. Yes, I do totally respect Councillor Simmet, but I was going to reiterate that this is a beautiful building, and for me, as a councillor for Willerby and Kirkella, this is the best location that it would be central for some of us to attend. Plus, I think it has got a significant structure and history, and is not normal building that we say we want to move on it. Yes, with the the plan, it's been, the staff are working remotely, they can book the rooms, technology, all of this can happen, but that doesn't mean we need to relocate. The question is not a question, it's a comment about a question. It's a...
Sorry, we're asking
Councillor Smith, sorry,
the
Councillor
question.
Smith, I think we're discussing the question you raised, but
Yes.
I've got Councillor Meredith wants to come in as well.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose what Councillor Smith has done is picked a very important topic, taxpayer efficiency, and he's picked a very controversial point of view. And this is an overview and scrutiny committee. We have to have an overview, we have to scrutinise. We also have to debate things, because at the end of the meeting, we will have to make a recommendation. Thus, actually, the conversation we're having now is between the members of this committee rather than the officers that have answered the question. So I'm throwing in my 2 penn'orth worth, because I am going to make a recommendation recommendation for this committee in line with what Councillor Smith has said, but probably not with the conclusion he would have reached. And if he thinks the recommendation is wrong, he is welcome to debate me and make a different recommendation. But we as a committee, I would say, Chair, at this point are debating it. And what I would say is that there were 2,000 staff in here per day before COVID. There are 800 staff in here per day after COVID. Therefore, 3/5 of the site is now obsolete. Now, forget about Beverley Police Station, that because of 300 people responding to a survey out of 500 who wanted it more central, more accessible, but didn't want it to move from the boonies of Beverley to the centre. Forget about that and the silly situation where it's not going to be here, where all public services are under one roof, which would have been fantastic. Ultimately, 3/5 of the site is now obsolete. As a result, the question is there anything we can do about that? Because at home, I have a leaking roof. I need a new roof, but I don't have 30 grand to replace it. So I bodge it and I fix it and I put a bit of expanding foam here and a bit of cement there. I doubt very much the council has a few hundred million to build entirely new premises.
Can you
Therefore, Chair,
condense this into
the points I've raised set out a stall, and the question I've got is if we don't have the ability to build an entirely new set of premises, because it would bankrupt the authority to do so, is there a way of selling off a portion of the site, or better yet, renting it for a prolonged income that we can then take back if we ever need it, if circumstances change like they did with COVID, in an effort to ensure a proper renovation of this place, empty all that end, put everybody in here, knock that down, rebuild it, and then sell this end, or vice versa? Is there a way of moving it around so business can continue to function whilst we rationalise the estate, efficiencyise the estate, and at the same time make ourselves fit for the future in a world that has changed dramatically since this place was first built?
Gone off, right? Yeah. All right. So that's exactly what we're looking at, Richard. We are still talking a number of public sector partners about coming onto this campus. Should those conclude that they're not coming, then we need to look at what we do need here moving forward, in however the council's shaped, and what we've got left and what we can sell off. But at the moment, we're still talking to partners to come and rent space, and they're live discussions.
Could the recommendation then, Chair, be that if Plan A, which is what James has just described, doesn't work, a Plan B is presented to this committee, and then our workshop in January, we allocate a meeting at the time when the document will be ready. There's no point allocating it in June if James won't have anything ready till September, for us to actually look at not just the asset rationalisation of the council, but of this particular building in isolation, or this particular estate. It's probably a better phrase.
Yeah.
James, do you want to respond to that?
You're looking at for me to come back in September.
I was pulling a number out the air, a date out the air. The point was, Chair, is that we will set a work programme. We will assign topics to meetings every 6 weeks. There's no point in us assigning this topic in June if James wouldn't be ready until September. So ultimately, if officers work with Democratic Services and Rob were to factor in a time for the date to meet, at a point where James is able to say, Plan A has been explored, public sector partners have been offered it, they've either said yes, job done, or they've said no, Plan B, present Plan B to us as and when it's drafted.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, sorry, just a minute, Rob.
Yeah, I think what we're asking for there is fairly simple. We're asking for this item to come back again with specific options and information about County Hall. Is that correct? Yeah, okay. We'll do that and we'll incorporate into the workshops.
Sorry. Councillor Smith.
Chair, are we doing recommendations now? Because I'm getting confused here. I thought there was a structure.
Consider them.
Sorry, Chair, I thought there was a structure so that we ask questions, get answers, and then at the end, we're going all over the place.
We'll consider the proposed recommendation at the end of the questions, and I've only got one more, which is...
Sorry, Chair, point of order. You can float a recommendation at any point,
Yeah,
and we debate them at the end.
We'll discuss it at the end, indeed. I've only got one more, which is Councillor Healy. Thank you.
It's clear that it's a really important subject. The recommendation to come back is a valid one. I think an organisation like this with £1 billion turnover, effectively delivering services across 900 square miles, 3,000 kilometres of roads and statutory services around children and adults, has to have a place. It has to have a place for people to come together. It has to have a place for people to bounce off each other. I think one of the concerns that we should have, actually, in many ways, is the level of reduction in people coming to work. because where it was before COVID. I mean, COVID and the restrictions that were put in around social distancing were all meant to be temporary, but clearly there's been a sort of a grasping of that situation, and people have stayed away from work. It's certainly a concern, and I know it's a concern that the leader of the council has expressed in the past about people just not being here. You know, we had a director of adult social care, for example, who was not here very much and who lived a long way away. And we've suddenly been pulled up on the CQC. I think it's important that people are in the office. And my concern is that the flexible working thing has also gone too far. That would be, I know it's not necessarily going into the strategy, your area, James, but it is a corporate services issue for sure. We've had those conversations with the director before. And in terms of where, well, you know, this is a civic building, and I think that the governance of counties, of urban areas of the country, it takes place in civic buildings. So I think having these people here is a very, very valid thing. But there is also this question of the asset rationalisation. We did have the proposal to move the police station here. In terms of using the assets, that's a good idea. The problem was that this wasn't a great place behind a barrier for visible policing, and I'm delighted that the Police and Crime Commissioner has seen a different way on that one. So in short, I would suggest that the recommendation to look at this again is a valid one. And clearly work is being done on rationalising this place because there's been proposals put forward. But talking to us about how that's developing over the next few months, I think is an important way forward.
Thanks, Councillor Healy. Councillor Lee.
Yeah, I think all these are extremely valid points, and I think that the essence of this report today is really to update the committee on what progress has been made so far with the estate, and that's obviously the beginning and end of this report. I think the larger issue, the more general issue about working practices within the organisation is really not for this report, but this report must, and the assets that we have must reflect the working practices of the organisation. That's the point. And so my own view is that this is an ongoing thing, and I think that, you know, obviously it would make sense to come back either with a briefing note, I would suspect or suggest, or you know, obviously another presentation to update members on where we are. But this is a very movable feast. Clearly, it's moved hugely in the last 4 or 5 years, as we know, in respect of people working here. But this report is really about maximising as we stand today in terms of the numbers that are coming in. Obviously, the report isn't addressing the issue about whether people should or shouldn't come into work into County Hall every day, but it's actually reflecting, in fact, what the result of that is, and making sure that we get the overriding, which is the most important thing, the overriding best value for money for the organisation. So I don't think we're at variance here, but I think we've probably strayed off, if I can suggest, Mr. Chair, on exactly where we are in terms of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. I think where we started this is good. We said congratulations on over delivering against target, and it's an ongoing process, as you say. But the recommendation has been put forward that we specifically review the use or potential disposal of County Hall itself. We already have some partners in place, don't we? And a disposal obviously would close off other opportunities for revenue from potential tenants. So I think, you know, Guy, we are in a financial emergency. So I suppose on that sense, no questions are off the table. So from that point of view, I think the recommendation makes sense that we do ask for a review. A total disposal, as someone said, would probably bankrupt the council, to be honest. So, but just to make sure that we are looking at all options because of the serious situation that we're in going forward over the next few years. So, sorry, yes, do you want to come in?
Yeah, morning, Chair. In the report that James has presented under item 7.2, we've got noted that disposal of parts of County Hall remains unviable due to significant constraints, and the strategic focus will continue to be leasing out vacant blocks to partner organisations delivering a sustainable revenue stream. So at the moment, James could come back next year and give an update on how that is going. If you're asking for, I just need to understand exactly what the scope is of a review of County Hall, because a review of the future of County Hall beyond what James has already got planned could be quite substantial in terms of how that links in with our other assets in other towns. And you can see the debate that we've already witnessed this morning. So at the moment, that's what's happening, that James's team are doing. They're looking to lease out more parts of County Hall. That's what's in the report. And if we're Scrutiny are happy with that, or we can bring back an update. I would suggest that, unless you want something else.
Thank you. I think that's pretty much what I was saying. Is we have existing tenants and we're looking to market other parts of the building, so that we can't just say we're going to dispose of the County Hall, relocate somewhere, and break up existing contracts and tenancies. So that's got to come into the. But I think, as I say, there's probably no questions that we shouldn't ask. So this has been tabled. So I think we should ask for a review on that strategy just on County Hall. Are we happy
Sorry,
with
Chair,
that?
just to put a note on, because it's not going to be like Councillor Meredith said for June, maybe Rob can arrange it for the September, or have a look at the work
I
progress.
suggest we look at timetabling in January when we have our
Yes,
workshop.
that's a very good idea, because we need to make sure the timing is right, so not to overburden.
Yeah. Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Lee made a very good point when he said that we're not here to talk about, for example, our staffing policy or structures. However, the two, as Councillor Healy pointed out, are intrinsically linked. If you've got 10,000 staff, you need to house 10,000 people. If you've got 200, you need to house 200. So one goes with the other. That's sort of like two shoes going in step, as it were. With that in mind, if we look at this as Adam's just pointed out, 7.2 is Plan A. The strategic focus will be continue towards leasing out our vacant blocks to partner organisations. Fantastic. If that works, we've got not only got an income stream, we've got rid of the heating bills, for example, the electric, they're paying for those. And if we ever need them back, we've got them. We've not sold and disposed of our assets, we're simply sweating them. So to me, that seems sensible. Therefore, what could be brought back to this committee would be the success of Plan A. And that could be something as simple as a briefing note. If James turns around and says, we have 100% occupancy of all our vacant areas, here's a briefing note and a high five. I think that would suffice because the plan has been followed successfully. If the plan hasn't been followed successfully, then it might be that we need to bring it back actually as a substantial item to the committee to look at what to do next. And that again is where the debate and the discussion comes in, based off Councillor Smith's original suggestion of, I'd say that was some off the wall blue sky thinking. You can do whatever you want when you're making a plan. And the question is, what do the members of this committee that are responsible for the overview and management scrutiny of the authority want to recommend for officers to explore? That's the point of scrutiny, Chair. With a critical friend, with a helping hand, we're there to help the portfolio holder and the officers do the heavy lifting. There's a century's experience around this table. Let's use it. But we only need to do that if Plan A fails. And so, James, basically, our workshop is in January. You've got until then to work out whether we need a meeting booked or not. No pressure.
Thanks, Councillor Meredith. Can I just ask Rob to try and, sorry, before we close it down, Councillor Healy, and then we'll try and close this discussion up.
Yeah, I was just think that, is there a wider piece of work here? Because I think what we've touched upon here are things like working practices, things like the pandemic, and should we be getting back to that? It's obviously wider than James's brief on assets, but I certainly feel, as a member of this scrutiny committee, that those questions around the way that the organisation is functioning now, post-COVID, are correct. And do we need to be looking at that in more detail? So I'd like to think that we could bring some sort of more detailed piece of work, which almost, I suppose, directs the decisions and discussions on asset rationalisation. And I'd like to see something like that come before this committee at some point.
Rob.
Well, shall we do both, and shall we do both at the same time? Shall we have an item on asset rationalisation and talk about flexible working practices and agile working and all the rest of it?
So,
Councillor Smith, sorry. So we've got two recommendations here. Have you got wording to read back, Rob? Councillor Smith. Sorry.
Thank you. So basically, it's just really to build on everything that's been said, and I'm not sure whether this comes in a recommendation here or a work programme, which I wanted to ask the question, is can we not have James and have corporate services here at the same time so we can talk about the building and the
Yeah.
people? Yeah,
Yeah.
is that right?
We'll if we leave that there now, and then we'll take that option to the work programme at workshop setting, and we'll do that with the scopes and set it out for, so you know who's going to be there, and we'll agree when it is, and we'll do it both at the same time. Nice wide discussion on that.
Right. I will. Sorry.
Does that, that's point of explanation, sorry, does that mean that we don't need a pro forma submitted on this and we can trust in Rob to have that one sorted for us for the, yeah.
For the January workshop.
So that's all sorted, so nobody needs to rush off and finish one by Monday at the deadline.
No, no.
And can I also just clarify as well, nobody has mentioned the loss of the best bacon sandwich in Beverley. It was like gammon when the point used to be inside. It was fabulous pre-COVID.
I think that really is going off the base, but anyway. So we're agreed that we'll consider those two options at the workshop in January. Okay, everybody happy with that? Right. Thank you very much. I suggest we just have a 2-minute break between this project and the next 5. Councillors goes 5, but let's make it 5, please. Thank you. Do we take our seats again, please? Councillor Tucker, Councillor Jeffries, gentlemen.
Like herding sheep.
Cats, even. Yeah. Sheep are easy. Sheep are easy. Sit down, Richard. Councillor Tucker, can we hear? Does what? All right, okay. We're not on yet, are we? No. We are. Right, thank you very much. We'll resume the meeting. Our next item is the strategic risk register review for Q2 25-26. And Councillor Tucker, are you going to introduce this?
I'd be delighted to, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, members. So I'm here today to introduce the strategic risk register to you. As you may be aware, the accounts and the audit regulations require us at East Riding Council to have arrangements in place for the management of risk. Risk management enables us to identify any potential problems before they happen, or in the case of opportunities, to try leverage to cause them to happen. Risk management affords us great resilience and improves service delivery and agility to respond. We have a strategic risk register relating to the highest levels of risk that we may face, which is in today's report, which it was reflected in that. We also have a service level risk register for each service area underpinning each service plan. We have risk coordinators, the glue and conduit, appointed within each service area, and the directors of service are set out as the risk owners to improve the risk evaluations and update any submissions. These updates flow through the CLT that give final approval for benchmarking the risks and checking that they're fully reflective on the point of time. You are aware that reports go to Cabinet and OMC on a biannual basis for strategic risk. The report goes to Audit Committee each quarter, and the Audit Committee, who are responsible for satisfying themselves that we do indeed have an effective approach to management risk. However, as portfolio holder, if I can be so presumptuous to this committee, I would like to recommend that the report now comes 4 times a year rather than biannually to this committee. And given that we face greater risk in the coming years than we have had before. And that's basically my introduction, Chairman. So I'll hand over to Mike. And I say that was just a recommendation from me. It is presumptuous, but I feel that actually this committee should look at the risk 4 times a year and rather just twice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tucker. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, did you want to take a moment, Councillor Galt?
Please go ahead, Mike. Yeah.
Right,
I need a moment.
I didn't want to interject. Yeah, good morning, committee. This, as mentioned thus far, this report represents the strategic risk as of Q2 end September this year. You have page 35 of your pack, which is a very handy one-pager, which articulates all of the risks on one page. Following the one-page summary, of course, the layout of the document, the report there then entails a detailed risk evaluation for each of the risks, showing the history of the risk, the controls in place, and the KRIs, the key risk indicators, and also a narrative supporting the current risk landscape and what's being done in that area. The report reflects that 2 risks have increased in score on this particular report, which are the adult social care risk and the business change risk. 1 risk has been added since you last saw the report. It was actually added last quarter, which leads into Councillor Tucker's point in that you wouldn't have had oversight of that risk being added in the last quarter because the report didn't come to you. But that was actually added last quarter, and therefore it's new to this report for yourselves. And I'll talk a little bit more detail around that particular risk in a moment. And also since the last report, we've combined the 2 legal and democratic risks, SRO7 and SRO8, into one risk. Nothing's been lost on that merge. It's just a simple merge of the risks to keep the report on a more concise basis. So in summary, the 5 red risks that we've got, I'll cover in brief detail and I'll lend over to questions. We've got the finance risk SRO1, the new ICB risk SRO3, SRO4 adult social care risk, SRO5 business change risk, and the newly merged SRO8 risk. So on to SRO1. The reason that remains red is it just dovetails into very lengthy conversations that have been had in previous committees, and that reflects the current financial position that we are in as regards to council compounding pressures from children's and adult services in terms of complexity and demand, which is leading to cost pressures. The report articulates a very strong performance to budget for a number of directorates, which is in key reflection of the huge amount of work that officers have put into maintaining budgets in those areas against those competing pressures that I've said. In addition to that, again, we've got the significant pressure of the Fair Funding 2 review, which is likely to be very large reduction in the amount of available funding for us in next year and future years. So that's SRO1. Again, the report contains further detail of how we're controlling that at the moment in terms of the shadow SLT, which we've named OLT, leading to SLT being able to focus on cost saving reductions. We've still got the spending control panel in place, and we've got the request to recruit panel still in place. And alongside all of that, as you know, at the moment, we've got the financial planning process where some really stark decisions will have to be made around how we're going to deliver a balanced budget for the coming years. If I just move on then to the SRO4, which is the adult social care risk. Of course, we have next Tuesday the first deep dive scrutiny committee for adult social care. It wasn't my intention to cover that in very great detail today for that reason. If we left that for that committee, that would be my advice at this point. But needless to say, the score has increased. That is on the back of the inadequate rating score, and we're currently re-evaluating that risk as we speak. And newly penned risk will dovetail into that improvement plan journey, and that will be represented on the next report. If I then move on to the newly added risk, which is SRO3, and if I may, just to give you a little bit of background to that, and that is similarly linked to adult social care, but it also covers children's services, and that is the huge changes that are currently undergoing within ICBs and the decommissioning of NHS England, which is putting cost pressures directly back through to us on the within the council. Our intention is to, as articulated within the report, is to seek collective agreement with other councils towards the ICB to come back to the table and agree, what's known as a Section 75 agreement in terms of that contractual agreement of how care will be provisioned and how we will work with that. But at the moment, because of the changes within the ICB and the fact that they have to reduce their complement of costs down to 50%, that in itself is a risk in that we might not be able to get the same people around the table that we were used to. That's SRO3. And then SRO5, the nature of the SRO5, the business change risk, that score has increased on this particular quarter. It directly in comparison to the financial position, in that it's a much larger challenge now to be able to meet the savings requirements needed in order to dovetail into the financial plan. So that's in a period of process of being rebooted as we speak, which the Transformation Board are obviously fully aware of, and helping us to get to a very coherent place as to how we're going to deliver those savings through business change elements. And because that's such a transient piece at the moment, that's the reasoning for that particular score to be increased in score at the moment. And then finally, before I invite questions, I'll cover SRO8, which is the data protection risk, and that's directly related to the FOIs and the subject access requests. Again, if we just consider what I've already mentioned around the complexity and the increasing number and demand around adult social care and children's services. That's putting an awful strain on the number of FOIs and SARs. We're not alone in this arena. It's the same for most organisations on a national basis. It's just that we are a local authority. We've got a huge amount of residents, and therefore the actual demand, the number of those FOIs and SARs, and it's very difficult to keep on top of those. Some of them are very detailed, and it's very difficult to manage the numbers. So our focus has to be on quality. The information governance team is directly deep diving into any areas of the council, any directorates that have got a high number, and jumping all over that to try and get those numbers down and under control as best we can. But the key focus against that tide of huge demand is to maintain the quality. Indeed, there have been some large high-profile cases in the news lately where the Information Commissioner's Office has tabled £350,000 fines towards some organisations, one of which was public orientated, such as ourselves, up to press. The ICO have sought favourably against public authorities because ultimately know that any fines imposed might filter down to a reduction of council services. So, but we just need to be mindful of that and continue to manage the demand. And at that point, Chair, I will lend over to any questions.
Thank you, Mike. I'll take the chair's prerogative of asking the first question, which I mean, the role of this report is to flag up to us serious strategic risks to the council. And as you mentioned, we've gone from 3 red flags to 5 since we last saw this report. One of them being adult social care. When we saw this report 6 months ago, it was amber. In the intervening period, we've had the CQC. So when this report was being put together was round about when the CQC were doing their visit here, which produced obviously a report which we were all very disappointed to see and is being addressed. But my point is, based on this report, it was amber 6 months ago and we shouldn't be worried about it. So telling us it's red now is a bit after the fact. And if that's the case, then how reliable are these red, amber, green traffic light warnings?
Thank you for the question, Chair, and it's a very pertinent question. And that moment of reflection at the point where the CQC rating came out was a significant point of action for myself and my team in order to actually look on a reflective basis over what went wrong. There are equally as much as the inadequate rating was inadequate, there were a large number of indices which actually created a picture as articulated within the CQC report of great service. So I think it was a lack, perhaps we didn't know ourselves as well in certain areas of underperformance, notably waiting lists. Notably, we hadn't to press looked at the leadership turnover, which was a key factor within the CQC report. So what I can give assurance to this committee is that reflective piece has taken place thus far. It will, so in terms of Councillor Tucker articulating that we have risk coordinators, just to reinforce, those risk coordinators are direct reports to the directors of services, and I carry out regular benchmarking, familiarisation and coordination sessions with those, of which I've had one, and within the particular briefing which I've given, which has gone out to all of the directors. It's that assurance piece of actually, what do we need to look at differently? Do we need to look at any of these other risks differently with a new lens in respect of, how we were caught short on the CQC rating? I hope that answers your question. I'm happy to take any further questions.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I hear what you're saying, but we did know we had a problem with leadership, and we did know it was taking people a long time to be able to access the services, even if they're content with them in terms of the quality of service. So the issues that have cost us this poor rating were known to us, but were not sufficiently flagged in the last report to say there's a red flag problem here. So it does raise really whether we're looking at the right indicators in terms of each area. So I take your answer, your point about saying that we will review that going forward, but I think it's worrying that we didn't have this area flagged as red. You were nearly promoted you to a councillor there, Andy. Sorry, Andy Parkinson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just build upon that point and your question, Councillor Clamp, because actually the key word there was indicators. And it's really clear in the CQC report that we have not been strong enough on our evidence base around performance data, essentially. So if you think about how we determine levels of risk, some of that's quantitative. We're looking at performance reporting, we're looking at data, and the other of it is qualitative. We're talking to people and individuals and getting that sort of subjective view as well. And you know, the reality is it's not been good enough, and that's in the CQC report. So what I can say is that the approach to risk, the level of detail that we will go in forward, is in the recovery plan. So that is mandated in the document. That will be looked at and done. But we do need to significantly improve our performance framework, and that's been one of the key issues that's been flagged. And we are looking at that sort of live. I mean, the scale of activity that's going on now is quite significant in the council around. I mean, essentially, we're reviewing every single case in our care management system. So yeah, we take the point, and it will be improved. And yeah, it's a great example, actually, this of when you've not got the right evidence base to form risk-based decisions on. So we're on with that, and that you'll see improvements, definitely.
Thank you. I mean, I've seen the recovery plan, the detailed one for CQC, because I'm also going to be on that committee, and it is a very detailed. There's a Gantt chart. There's a 10-week window, 3-month window, so we can see a very clear plan of everything that's being addressed. So that's good news. But I think Councillor Redshaw wanted a wiggle on this one.
If I may, thank you, Chair. Yeah, as has been said, it was certainly concerned that it needed the CQC to flag this up, and it really related clearly primarily to the council's front door and how we manage the front door in terms of accessing the council services, and also really the lack of listening to the voices of the users at really at every stage throughout the process, and that very much includes the front door. I was, for example, in conversation with representatives from Site and Support, Hull and East Yorkshire, a few days ago, and they were telling me, I was asking how do we compare, for example, with services in Hull, and East Riding, if you're looking at white cane training, for example, then users are waiting 2 years, and somebody can be afflicted virtually overnight, and they're waiting 2 years for white cane training. They're even waiting 6 to 8 months for an assessment. So the front, I know, I'm very much assured that a lot of actions are in place, but we come back to the fact that, and as you say, we need the KPIs in place so these don't surprise us in the future.
Okay, and Councillor Sarable's next.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Mike. My question is about the future, risks or threats about the cybersecurity. So with the ongoing global and national, news that is going around, how council is prepared for the cybersecurity and how we are investing or how we are making sure that we will have a proper plan in place? Maybe a question for Andy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Sarabel. So there are significant increase in threats around cybersecurity, as we well see in the press. It is always a difficult problem, this, and I think we've looked at this probably at this committee in previous questions as well. That the balance is that the level of threat that we're seeing now at a kind of international level, and often these are state-sponsored international events, is significantly outweighing the local authority's ability from a budget perspective to keep up. So there's a point, and we're lobbying very hard on this with government at the moment, that at what point is this a nationally funded issue because local authority budgets cannot ever be enough to give you absolute assurance that you'll never have a cyber security attack. If you look at the scale of the attacks to some of the companies that have been affected, Jaguar Land Rover is a good example. They've pulled in £2.5 billion now out of the public purse to keep their operations running. So, and that's a company of that size and that scale. So, yeah, if you spoke to our cybersecurity expert, they would tell you that it's a kind of it's a when, not if event, and it's all about your recoverability. It's about how quickly you can recover from a cyber event rather than actually stopping it happening in the first place. So we're always reviewing that. We're constantly trying to improve our sort of drills and our ability to react to these events. But we are very, very concerned about this going forward. There was several London boroughs that were recently have had a cyber event, and the golden rule now is you shut your own systems down immediately. But then it's all about business continuity, because if we did that to stop the cyber attack, then how do you then operate care services without those systems operational? So business continuity this is why this risk is so significant, because we need to really keep on with that piece of work. And I think when you speak to our technology colleagues, we could spend 20 million on cybersecurity, 50 million, and tomorrow we could be breached. So it's a really important point. It's one of the few things that keeps me awake at night is when will that happen and how are we going to react? So we are on with that. We do have a very strong backup infrastructure here at the council, but we try not to publicly talk too much about what we've got in defence, because that often leads to cyber criminals essentially targeting your organisation. So.
Sorry, Chair, just wanted to extra comment on that. So maybe, one part of, I totally agree with the point that we cannot prevent it, but how we are prepared for, how good we are in terms of, old fashioned systems it used to be in place before even these systems, be in place to work for our services. Do we have enough of knowledge and stuff that, just in case if this happens, we will have a very, recovery or a backup.
Thank you. And
yeah, I mean, it's a constantly live conversation. We've got policies in place, we have plans in place for every service about how we do that business continuity work. But it is a live conversation right now in my service, because we are looking at increasing the work that we're doing in that space. I mean, often these attacks are done through sort of issues where you've got somebody clicks on a link in an email or somebody click unknowingly. And so the education and the awareness piece is really, really important. So we do a lot of that work already, but we are looking at trying to increase that.
Councillor Tucker, did you want to comment?
Well, but basically Andy's just chipped in what I was going to say, but just out of interest for members, we don't just get 2 or 3 attacks a day. We get thousands of attacks every single day. And those attacks peak on a Friday evening till a Monday morning. And the busiest day of the year for attacks in this organisation is Christmas Day.
Thanks, Councillor Tucker. Councillor Phoenix next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about the actual process of the red flags. I have obvious concerns for the section. You have to forgive my eyes because I can't see very well, but the 08, SR 08, or is it 03? No, it's 03. And the 04 and the 05, obviously. Just the way in which these are highlighted to us, I almost feel like it should be like a klaxon going off, with a loud sound saying, look at this, we really need to do something. And the way that we get these reports on, for example, we look at things on Health OSC. But I just wonder when as Councillor Tucker said, we can have these more often, and I think we really should, because I'm just conscious that members aren't really fully aware of what the importance of the red flag is. So yeah, you see a red flag and you talk about it, but then what do we do? How urgent is it? It's almost like it's much more urgent that we've given credence to. So I don't know whether we can have a different system of informing us of these, because, you know, we look at health and social care and where we are now. We know we've got this committee, that's fine. Presumably that's going to be ultra monitored. But I just think, I'm just concerned that if that had come up on Health OSC, you know, what would we do about it? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Phoenix. I think Councillor Tucker and Michael.
Yeah, it's just a real quick comment. I mean, some of the more longer standing members will probably remember Vanessa Walker, Councillor Vanessa Walker, who fought long and hard to get the RAG rating put into this organisation, because historically, I can go back 12 years. 12 years ago, we didn't have that system in place, and it was very much guesswork, and members often lost sight of things. And the very fact we have this traffic light system in red, amber and green now does focus your mind a little bit. But it's an ever-changing picture, and you're right. I agree with every word you said there, Councillor.
Mike, is that add to that?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question, and I would fully support the recommendation from Councillor Tucker to come to you more often. But one thing I would just like to reinforce is, obviously, it doesn't wait for us to present it at the committee. The moment that we, you know, it is a very dynamic register that this informs. For instance, the SRO3 came across my desk on a Thursday, and we'd already discussed it at CLT on the following Monday as an exceptional item at CLT. So just to give this committee that confidence that you see the report of where we are at that point in time, but it's not that we haven't taken any action at that point that it's raised. So I just wanted to give that confidence, really.
Thanks, Mike. Councillor Phoenix.
I think it's just what we do with it. You know, we know that you guys are doing the right thing, but we need to be fully informed as to the severity of it. That's, I don't know. I just feel like I'm not fully informed. That's all I'm trying to say.
Councillor Tucker.
And that's the very fact, Councillor Phoenix. I suggested it comes to this committee every quarter, really, because if something's red rag rated, in my world, this committee should be saying we need to look at this now, not next week, not in 6 months. We need to do it now. And that's why I made that recommendation from this side of the bench, that this report comes every quarter rather than every 6 months.
Thanks, Councillor. Well, I think we can discuss that at the end under recommendations. But I mean, on this particular one, the ICB red flag is a new risk that's been identified, and it seems to me, rather than us waiting for 3 or 6 months to get an update on it, it would be a good idea to ask HOSC to delve into the detail of this as one of our recommendations. I know you're changing your work programme because of the CQC investigation, but maybe this is something that HOSC could take on in the interim.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, rather than the quarterly, sometimes I think I'm not saying we have to have it on a committee. It's almost like this is a red flag, we're going to tell you now. Do you know what I mean? Rather than waiting, because 3 months is a long time, isn't it? Even then, you know, I just think there should be some other system. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Phoenix. Councillor Walker, please. Next.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that was much of my question, but I would also like to look at the relationship of this, because I agree. These RAG ratings are the pointers for scrutiny, aren't they? That's exactly their purpose. So yeah, the faster that we know that there's going to be a red flag, the better. And I believe you said that you were presenting to Audit Committee quarterly. So there isn't a great deal of extra work preparing to bring it here quarterly.
No, thank you for the question. It would be a total flip of the frequency. So Audit Committee is currently 4 times a year, and as it stood for this committee up to press, it's twice a year, and it will be flipping that around. The role of Audit Committee is quite clear, and that is they have to seek the assurance that an effective approach to risk management is in place, not necessarily the detail behind of each of the risks, and obviously notwithstanding your role is to deliver the scrutiny element, and that's why I support the recommendation of Councillor Tucker that indeed it comes here, because you know, whilst I'm assured that there's an effective approach to risk management in place, giving it to the Audit Committee twice a year in terms of a framework approach seems more appropriate. So that's yeah, that's why I support the recommendation.
Thank you.
Yes, please, Chair.
Go ahead.
I'd like to look again at the relationship between this strategic risk register and our business performance, which is also RAG rated, which is also reported, but separately from this. So although we have a detailed dashboard and we can drill into that to see, for me, the most important part of that is the trend. That in which direction is it going? Do we need to give more attention to an area that's going further towards the red? But those are entirely different. And it doesn't seem to make any sense to me, Chair, that we're looking at two things remarkably similar, because these are wake-up calls for members, but they're entirely different. They're not integrated. I understand there is a difference between strategic risk, and I'd like to come back on that as well. But do you feel that there's sensible points of producing a dashboard which really highlights where we need to be looking? These are red, these are also red, but they're in different reports. That looks like an accident waiting to happen.
Councillor Tucker.
Yeah, if I may, Chairman, I'm pretty sure at the last time I was at this committee, we discussed that very fact, and I know Mr. Lowe took it away, and that work is in progress now to combine them, because we all thought that was a very sensible suggestion. But the reason I suggested that this particular risk register or standalone comes here is to give this committee greater scrutiny.
And I think the business plan dashboard does that as well. But I'm interested in the method of how you and your team understand that a new risk has appeared, and the classic example is SRO3. For instance, earlier this week, we learned at HOSC that our inpatient mental health capacity are suffering rising demand and an inability to meet national standards for clinical services. Now, I understand that we can contract out these services, but we're not contracting out our responsibility, surely. If that's a factor of SRO4 and our duties in relation to the Care Act, which is why it's a risk, surely the same is true for services that we contract out if they are not meeting national standards. That's a risk, but I don't understand how you would necessarily be alerted to that.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. If I could draw back to your first question, and that's the performance and the performance reports and the risk reports. So an easy, quick win, whilst we seek that further work that Simon Lowe is completing, and indeed we're all taking a part of that, myself included, is simply to bring the annual performance report with the risk report to the same sitting of this committee, and therefore you've got the oversight of both reports. And certainly from discussions that we've had so far, and indeed I think you inferred the same, that the reports serve a different purpose, and whilst you want a report to pinpoint these are the significant risks to the organisation, this is what you really need to be concerned about, but you also want to know the service delivery element. You want to know the recycling rates, which aren't something that isn't red, but something that we're interested in, because it's all about obviously delivering services for our residents, which is our primary objective as a council. That the risk report is really there to say, well, what could go wrong? So I think they do serve a different purpose, and therefore I think it's important that they are segregated, and therefore that easy quick win, which I discussed offline with a number of councillors already, seems to be the appetite that if we brought that report at the same sitting, that would suffice. And then in relation to the second question, which is more about an emerging risk. So as I said to you just a short time ago, I got the call on a Thursday. I'd already collaborated with other councils in the area by the Friday evening, and I'd tabled it at CLT, and we agreed collectively that it would be added to the register. And indeed, so the risk coordinator, which was referenced earlier, from a dynamic approach, that your particular element, I mean, no doubt whatsoever, but I can't qualify that entirely at this juncture because I've not had those conversations. But that will have resonated back through to the risk coordinator, and the risk coordinator will already be formulating an understanding of, do I need to change any of the controls relating to this particular risk? And on the specific update points, which are at the end of each quarter, they will definitely reach out to all of their colleagues and collaboratively scoop up any shared insight into the current risk landscape within their area. So that's, as Councillor Tucker said, the glue and the conduit are the risk coordinators, because with all the best will in the world, I know an awful lot about lots, but I'm not a subject matter expert on anything apart from possibly risk. But that ensures that we have that subject matter expert looking at it and collectively gathering up that insight.
Thank you very much. So it sounds like that hoovering up towards the 90-day period will still lead to that bunching of raising of red flags. It's bound to feed in that way, isn't it? So is there a need then for that instant raising of a flag to say, this is either an emerging risk or one that has been previously falling but is now rising towards red? We're going to raise a red flag at the next item, at the next report. As Councillor Phoenix said, 3 months is a long time. Is there an opportunity to find an immediate conduit there so that it's aware, and then the appropriate, be it legal or data or adult social care, wherever it is, that chair can be aware that there is an issue, please?
Yeah, could I suggest that a potential flow through would be obviously the utilisation of the portfolio holders, so that that would give the necessary oversight. So if we were to think of an easy to land immediate solution, that would be for a recommendation possibly at cabinet or something for the portfolio holders to actually ensure that they pick that up in their regular catch-ups with the relevant officers. And I think that, forgive me for offering a recommendation, but I would potentially suggest that would be an easy to pick up, and it would get the appropriate ownership in the right direction from a member's point of view.
Mike, I think that's a master stroke. Thank you very much. We'll come to under recommendations. Can we, Chair? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My question really is for Mike. It's a simple one. I'm hoping you can make this easy for me. Based on your professional opinion, when you look at this page, obviously it looks bad. It's like a piece of food in the supermarket I would not put in my basket with all the red and yellow on it. But is that normal, or as normal as it can be in an organisation of this size to have that many risks?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Smith. What I can say is we chair, myself personally, the Humber Risk Network, which scoops up local councils. I think I've actually got a fire service on there. I've got the Humber Bridge on there. I've got a council down south, and I've got a council from Lancashire from there as well. But just to give you the understanding that I've got the oversight of a number of councils, and what you see before you is pretty much commonplace throughout each organisation. We regularly discuss, when I mentioned earlier about a scooped up SRO3, the ICB risk, and it got put across my desk by our executive director in that particular directorate, which was great because that's internally promoted and pushed. It was the likes of Hull that gave me the immediate oversight of that's exactly where our heads are thinking. So absolutely, the bat phone's on to each of these other organisations. So as soon as I get something across my desk, I'll put it out to them, and likewise they will put through to me. But the fact that I chair that network gives us a head start on that, because it all comes through me.
Okay. Yes, go on. Yes, please.
Thank you. My other question really is to Councillor Tucker, and that is, obviously you're in the senior leadership team of the political wing, if you like, of this authority. So when you see a report like this, can I ask what you're doing from that side of the fence to try and address some of these concerns that have been raised?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, at Cabinet, we look at these, as already been said, And one of our roles, or my role, and the portfolio holder's role, is to hold officers' feet to the fire to actually get on top of this. But what I do recognise is, and the more I'm getting involved in this portfolio, is there is extrinsic and intrinsic risks. And some of the risks that are on the here today are not outside our control, but I'll give you a classic example, the ICB one. I remember 2 years ago, we entered an SLA with the ICB that they would look at Section 75s and would go 50-50 funding. Unfortunately, the ICB are in free fall, looking at £50 million overspend, cutting the staff by 50%, and they've reneged, they've not paid. And that has given us huge challenges. And, you know, one of the things that we need to get back to OSC is we need the IC back to OSC and actually why you're paying your bills. Because obviously we're not saying to residents, if they've got mental health issues, we're not saying, no, we're not going to look at you. No, you stay where you are. We continue to provide that care. And again, that has a knock-on effect. So one of the roles that we are as portfolio holders is with that bridge between your members and with those senior leadership teams. But just be really aware there are intrinsic and extrinsic risks, and some of them come out of the blue. We never expected that the ICB would never pay the bills, but they haven't, even though we had it in writing.
Thanks, Councillor Tucker. I've got Councillor Healy next, please.
Thank you. I think when I look at these risks, often what I feel is this sort of overwhelming sense of impotency. You know, how do we fix these things? You know, it's a real challenge, and I don't think we can escape the sort of elephant in the room here, which is SR01 about failure to continue to entertain spending within the budget. And now the leaders, group leaders, were party to a meeting. Obviously, it was last week. 3 of us were on this committee. Deputy leader of the council's here. You were there, Andy. Where the stark reality of the fair funding, or the unfair funding review, I might call it, was laid bare. Where effectively a £19 million projected deficit within 3 years has pretty much doubled to £33 million because of the nature of the settlement, which is mitigating against rurality, because it's based on deprivation. So our £33 million makes us one of the top 10 or so losers of unitary authorities in the country. And the winners are the likes of Birmingham City Council, for example, who are gaining 300 million. If we're losing 33, they're gaining 300. And other urban authorities as well, including Hull, who are coming out winners. Now, the conversation that we had, of course, and it's made, the point is made in the SR1 comment here, that Cabinet in response and senior leaders are developing options to mitigate the anticipated reduction through a combination of transformation, service redesign, savings proposals as part of the process. And obviously, I know that our chief executive has a radical plan to come forward with a leaner council going forward. But one of the points that we made at this meeting was we have heard this before. We have been here before. And how is it going to be different this time? So I just make these points, and we have to have faith that they're going to be fixed. And that's why I feel a bit impotent, really, because I'm not on the cabinet, I'm not an officer, but I don't make any political points about this. We want to be constructive and we want to support. But when we're talking about risk, it's there in black and white that this is very, very clearly the biggest challenge, I think, that we are going to face. So I suppose to make that into a question, and we asked it before, Andy in particular, and Councillor Tucker, how confident are we that we can turn this corner and get to where we need to be?
Thanks, Councillor. I think Councillor Tucker first, and then
and then I'll give way, if I can, to Ms Parkinson, because one of the things, and I think we've been very upfront with leaders of all the groups, and we are taking this one council approach because we know we've got a mountain to climb. There's no two ways about that. We use a company called Pixel, and Pixel didn't cost a lot of money. I think it's about £2,000 a year. But Pixel are projecting, so we don't actually know what the settlement is at the moment. We'll know that normally, historically, Christmas Eve. Initially, the settlement was going to be £20 million deficit. Now, Pixel are coming back and saying it could be 30 million. At the moment, we don't know. But what we do know we have to do some radical changes, and radical changes have to happen tomorrow, not next week or the month after the month after that. We don't have time. You know, we're on target to deliver a balanced budget, and if it was going well, and we probably will deliver a balanced budget next year. It's the year after, which is the real concern. So Councillor Healy is quite correct to raise this because it's a massive risk to us. But the Chief Executive has got a very clear, very concise plan, a very brave plan. And there will be some fallout, and members, you will be approached by members of staff who will be deeply unhappy with some of the changes that the Chief Executive needs to be. And to the benefit of our residents, we've got to hold our nerve, because you know, we can't live with a £30 million deficit, because that is a huge amount of money. And any reserves that have got will disappear very quickly unless we take some radical action. And on that point, I will hand back to Mr. Parkinson.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Tucker. Yeah, unprecedented times, isn't it, with our financial landscape? And I think one of the things that we were talking about earlier in the week is that, and I think you made reference, Councillor Healy, to the group leaders meeting, that pre the fair funding reforms, which, remember that the consultation only came out over the summer, it was in June when this started. If you modelled forward our financial performance, we were essentially in a surplus position over the next 4 years pre this reform consultation. Now, that was because we essentially took action last year, as many of you are aware, around our financial emergency response. So we put measures in place for cost control, and we started to sort of move money out of the organisation. Now, the issue that I think you're raising, which I think is the most important point here, is that what we really did in the last year was we focused very much on cutting cost. And we can no longer cut cost at the rate of these fair funding reforms. If they, as Councillor Tucker said, if they land at the numbers that they do, we have to do something significantly more and more fundamental than what we call the classic salami slicing of cost. So we are now entering a phase of whole system transformation. You know, that the only way that we will respond to those sort of financial challenges is that every service that we have will have to undergo a significant review from a number of different perspectives. That will cover off not just our delivery model, so whether we should be in-house, out-of-house, all of those sort of discussions would happen. And we're going to have to design services from literally from blank sheets of paper. And this concept, which you might be familiar with, of zero-based design or redesign and zero-based budgeting, which is a process where every single budget gets challenged, every single line. So we're in a very, very difficult time with our transformation agenda, because this was being planned. You know, the strategy that we were following as a council, and I might have said that here before, you know, survive and then thrive was the sort of language I've been using. So we've been planning thrive, but this is, when you look at SRO5, this is the interdependency we have, because it's the timeline now that is becoming the pressure to deliver the amount of transformation that we've got to do next year. We were planning that over a 2 to 3 year period. We were on a path of surplus positions. We thought we'd made some immediate cuts where we could get the budget into control. But now we're in a position where we've got to do significant overhaul, and that's got to happen really, really quickly. And that's why you've seen SRO5 increase, because essentially the scale of the ask is bigger. So, you know, what is different this time is a great question, and one that we're actively debating now in the senior leadership group, because we're going to have to execute at a scale we've never done before. And we're actively planning what those options are. This is a live conversation in the exec right now, but we will come to members obviously with what those proposals look like. What I would say, to give some comfort, let's not be too negative here, is the scale of our challenge is actually not as significant as what you're seeing around the country. There's a report came out of our colleagues in Bradford recently, who are in a situation of exceptional financial support, so the EFS sort of space, that they're borrowing about 120, 140 million from Treasury to be able to survive over the next 2 years, and that is against £100 million of asset sales in 2 years. So they're mandated to shift 100 million of assets in 2 years. So you know, our numbers are a challenge, but when you look at some of our other local authorities, this should be and will be delivered here. This is not an impossible challenge by any stretch of imagination, but it requires, as Councillor Tucker said, one system approach, one council approach. We've got to break through kind of silo services now, and we've got to pull things together, and that's what we intend to do.
Thanks, Andy.
Can I make one more comment, Chairman?
Yes, go on.
Just back to Councillor Healy. As a council, we remain asset rich. We have a large number of farms, a large number of arable land, a large number of buildings. And I've already asked the Chief Executive, are we in that state where we need to start selling the family silver? And he assures me, no, we're not. We don't need to start stripping assets to manage the debt. We can actually manage this ourselves. I'll just give you that assurance.
Yes, Councillor Healy, yeah.
Yeah, it is assuring to have the assurance, and we have had these assurances before, obviously. I think it's really important that we raise this here so that, you know, people are aware of the level of change that is required. It's kind of off the scale, and we don't know yet how it will impact on the family silver, how it will impact on service delivery. But clearly, in a situation, if the funding, we don't know the unfair funding review is going to work, but we do know that we're going to be seriously compromised by it. And we have this challenge to deal with. So I just put it out there really because of the importance of it. I mean, we had a transformational programme in the current year. We had 400 redundancies. We had a £12 million transformational programme. Now, a lot of that's been worked through already. And these challenges still there. I have full confidence in the Chief Executive to deliver, because we have to have faith in him. And I've heard his thinking. Leaders have heard his thinking. Political groups are going to hear his thinking, and we are behind him. But make no mistake that this is probably the biggest risk that we face. And we don't know what the impact is on residents. It's important that we know about it. And I'll just end by saying that's why I feel a sense of impotence about it, because I sort of feel sometimes, well, we see all these risks and we hear them, but, you know, fixing them is the thing, and that's down to you, and we're here to support you in whatever way we can.
Thanks, Councillor Healy. I mean, I must admit, I was a little bit surprised to see business change flagged as red when I looked at the report initially, because such a good job has been done over the last 12 years in doing the cost control, managing recruitment, etc. So yes, we've delivered, and we're going to come in with this year's budget balanced and not with the deficit. So big tick there, job well done. But the challenge is going forward, as Andy Parkinson's outlined, it's now so much bigger. And the risk is not, I think it's easy to identify what needs to be done and what the challenges are. The problem is timescale, I think, and can also be culture and resistance to change. So I think that's and I would rather it be flagged as red now, because as we were saying earlier, you know, adult social care wasn't flagged as red 6 months ago. This is being flagged to us now as being critical to achieving SR1 as well. So I think it's good that it's being flagged, because it is a big issue and a big challenge. And as you said, Councillor Healy, it's right that we highlight this and the extent of change that's going to be required. Having said that, I think the Transformation Board's identified where a lot of this change can come. Some of it's going to rely on technology, some of it's going to rely on management restructuring. There's an awful lot to do, but the work's in train. So I think as a member of that board, I would say I've got a good confidence that we're on the right track. The big challenge is time. Is that not right? Yeah.
Yeah, just Chair. I mean, it's exactly that. It's a timing issue now, and you know what we're going to have to really look at is how do we quickly navigate our processes and structures within the council to get these things done as fast as we can. I feel we are working on the right things. We had a peer review feedback on our children's services on Monday, and they confirmed that the transformation programme in children's services, for example, is exactly what all of the councils are looking at. So we've got the programme of transformation on the right issues. It's the ability to execute those plans now in time. But we're looking at that, and there are options available to us. So that will be worked up. And you know, we will do everything we can on the officer side to succeed.
Thank you.
And just to add to that, and that is why we need member buy-in, because as Councillor Healy's pointed out and Andy's pointed out, we have got some huge decisions to make. Some will be very unpopular among staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tucker. Councillor Redshaw.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Healy almost word for word put the questions that I was intending to put. But I think one of the things that comes out of this is that government, the way government funding is being calculated now, particularly in certain areas, is really desperately unfair, particularly on rural authorities such as ours. Yeah, we're in a position where we've got a dedicated schools grant reserve standing at 54.6 million. Yeah, we're in deficit. We're desperately in need of a national solution to funding of high needs provision. Yeah, we're expecting an announcement today, I think today, from the Education Secretary about the Best Start Hub programme that's expected to release 500 million of funding to establish 1,000 SEND hubs across the country. But the concern is that is likely to target what they term as disadvantaged areas. And because of the way the formulations are working, we may well miss out again. Yeah, it's the same story as was explained earlier about the £19 million that we're losing out as a result of current funding reforms. So that aside, clearly the business change programme is the major vehicle into looking to deliver a sustainable future, and it's been touched on, but it's going to involve a lot of cultural changes within the authority, and a lot of, as Councillor Tucker said, a lot of difficult decisions that we're going to have no option but to take, given the circumstances we're in. So what are we doing to keep people on board, and like we say, shall we say, avoid the cultural drag that might well come with it?
I think the chairman's already mentioned this, and I know Councillor Healy has. The leader and the chief executive are very keen that all groups, independents, right throughout the political makeup of this council, are on this journey together. And that's why we have these regular updates, and these regular updates will continue to make sure that we get member buy-in, and then it'll be down to the leaders of those groups to then feed back to their members. But those will continue.
Thank you. Any further?
Yeah, if I may, just 1 second. Page 74 of the report, SR 14. This was children, young people, education and schools. That there's a risk that the council may have insufficient early years childcare places in some areas of the East Riding, in line with increased entitlements over the next 18 months. And I suppose the question is, particularly in relation to specialist school places, this is clearly a major risk. I had a family I was working with where, as an example in the report, where the parents or one of the parents was unable to work because the child of primary school age was only maybe getting 2 or 3 hours of tuition a week. Unfortunately, we managed to find a placement for them, but that is a very different story for many parents across the East Riding, with different with children with different disabilities, and just the sheer number of people that are on our books. So what are we? It comes down to what are we doing to address that risk, as indicated in SR 14.
No, thank you for the question, Councillor Redshaw. I'm not sure if the committee are aware, but within the last 3 weeks, the children's sufficiency strategy has been approved. Councillor Cerebral is well there. So the strategy, it's, I can't remember, it's in the order of 70 to 90 pages in length, and it's extremely detailed around what the current pressures are within children's services, the lack of places, the trajectory of surplus places in schools and how that might feature in terms of utilising those for, the SEND children and specialist provisions. So without going into the 80 odd pages of the report, it is a very detailed report and it's a very comprehensive coverage of what the plans are in place to face into. So it's an acknowledged issue and it's been an addressed issue in terms of what the strategy articulates.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll probably catch up with Councillor Sorrell at some stage.
Sorry, I was going to say, I can also provide you with the briefing updates, but generally speaking, because of the population in the next 10 years of the younger children is going to be decreased. So we also considering a comprehensive next report for the, after January, but I can talk to you about that.
Thank you. If you allow me, just one other question, which is in relation to SR08, which was the percentage of subject access requests completed within 28 days to meet UK GDPR time limits. Now, we have a red milestone here. We've got a target completion within the 28 days of 90%, and we're only achieving 40%. So the question is, what do we need? What needs to change? Is the target wrong, or is it the fact we're underperforming?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Redshaw. What I can say is in terms of the trend of this particular performance at 40%, it's hovered around 40 to 50% for I would say the last 6 or 7 updates as that demand trajectory for the number of SARS and FOIs has increased. That's led to that position. The work, as I articulated earlier, the work that's underway is that from an oversight point of view, the information governance team keep a close check on the service areas that have the highest numbers, and they will actually deploy some of their own staff into those areas to try and fight that tide of activity. It has to be said, some of these requests are very, very extensive, and the redaction of some of the documents, some of the documents are 3,000 pages in length, and we have explored, and my colleague Mr. Paxton may be able to allude a little bit further, but we have explored on potential AI to carry out redactions, but it's not proved successful in the past. That's the commonality of the theme nationally, because I keep a check on that, because I asked the same question as you asked, what needs to happen to change? How can we mitigate this risk better? But at the moment, there are no easy AI solutions to be able to do that, but that would be an obvious next step. We can create an exception rule against SARS and FOIs if we choose to, but sometimes that process of offering an exception takes just as long as it might take to actually get the FOI or SAR over the line. So whilst I would love to give an immediate solution to that, there is no solution to that nationally as it stands at the moment, and most organisations, certainly in the public authority arena, are facing similar stats, and it really is about the quality control management, because what we don't want to do is disclose personal information of potentially vulnerable children or vulnerable residents, adults, or the like. We don't want to do that. We want to maintain the quality.
Andy.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on this, one of the difficulties that many councils are struggling with around response times is actually accessing the information from our systems and collating it in a quick and efficient way. And within our authority, we've got quite a bit of work to do on our data infrastructure, and that work is ongoing. We are very, very soon starting a project around data infrastructure. So we're in conversations with a tech provider that would significantly improve our data warehousing capability, and that would be the first big step forward for us as a council, where we can start to bring some of our key systems that hold this data and this information together. And that is a part of the answer of how you solve this, is that you access the information quicker. To Mr. Salter's point, you can automate some of that potentially in the future with AI. The other issue that we're looking at around this is a structural issue. So how do we actually organise ourselves as a council around all of this? So our model at the moment is very much a kind of hub and spoke model where it goes off into a service and it comes back. So that's being reviewed as well. This is a conversation we're having actively at the moment as well. So it's a tricky one. It is solvable. It takes a bit of time, but the installation of a better data warehousing technology will help us over the next 12, 18 months on this, and that's what we're about to start in January.
Okay. Only got two more. Councillor Jeffries next, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is along similar lines to Councillor Phoenix, which is gratifying, isn't it? Just really to state the importance of an early warning system for risk factors of ineffectual and effectual indicators, which will, of course, mean that you're rectifying the damage sooner, but also, I imagine, decreasing the cost that would be endured if that risk continued. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. So I think it is worth pointing out that whilst we have formal mechanisms of risk methodology and the way we manage that, there is an extensive informal approach that happens behind the scenes. So between each quarter and the reports that you would see if we went to quarterly, sometimes these risks can go up and down within that time period as well, because we are almost in daily conversations around these emerging risks and things that come up. And just to explain how it literally works, we're constantly in a weekly CLT session reviewing operational issues, and they literally will move week to week, those discussions. So whilst I want to give you some assurance that whilst there are the formal reporting structures here that you're saying, there is quite a significant amount of work that just daily goes on around these issues, and we're constantly in meetings discussing how do we keep a cap on that? Is that a problem? Let's qualify whether that's a problem. But I think that the broader point, which I think is an important one, is how do you all as councillors, every councillor on the council, access information about risk that's a bit more live and a bit more dynamic rather than the reporting structure? So that's something I'd like to take away and have a look at, because there's no reason, if you think about our performance data, that is available for everyone to dip in and have a look. So maybe we just need to revisit some of that approach outside of the committee structures, that you can access this information or get a feel for what is actually the sentiment almost around some of these topics. So we can have a look at that, and we could explore some options for you on that. But yeah, but please be assured that all we do is discuss risk, mainly in our meetings every week. It's a constant issue of trying to trying to resolve these problems.
Councillor Jeffries, you content? Thank you. Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Chair. Best till last always means that most of what I'm going to ask has been covered, but there were a couple of things with your permission I'd like to just explore.
That'll be brief then, will it?
You can live in hope, Chair. You can live in hope. So I'll take them in reverse order of how they've come up then, just while we're on the same subjects. So with the subject access request that Councillor Redshaw just mentioned, and the target being 90% and the delivery being 40%, ultimately there we have a policy problem. Either the policy needs to change or the practices need to change. Now, as a scrutiny committee, we're in a position where we can make recommendations to cabinets or full council. We can see policies changed. And you might turn around and say, well, we could actually meet the targets, even if the data is inaccessible, as Andy's highlighted, if we tripled the staff. But we'd take that money from a highways budget, at which point we have to decide what's more important, data access or potholes. And looking around the room, I think I can speak for everyone when I say potholes. So effectively, we'd be excusing you. So my question is, can we change the target date of 28 days? Can we change the policy? How much of it's governed by national legislation? How much is within our gift? Are there any consequences? Do you get a slap on the wrist with a wet lettuce or something much worse if the targets aren't met? In short, what can we do to empower and enable you? And can we extrapolate that across every one of the recommendations to make sure that we're not looking at one thing that says we should be doing this, but we're doing that, when actually a bit of common sense would dictate that simply changing things would solve everybody's problems? Sorry, I'm advocating for common sense in a scrutiny meeting, Chair. Probably not wise.
Thank you.
Sorry, would you like to ask your other questions at the same, or answer that? So the stipulated timeline for 28 days for the return of a SAR is deemed, it's a national regulation from the Information Commissioner's Office, so there's no leeway on that in any way, shape or form. And as articulated earlier, they have looked more favourably where there have been breaches, so that could be a subject user contacting the ICO directly if we haven't fulfilled the subject access request within that time period, and that shows through in the other KRI at the top of the table, which is the 3 for the quarter, where a subject user would have gone directly to the ICO. So we keep a track of that as well in terms of the number that have been approached to the ICO. So there is no leeway on it. As I said earlier, they do look more favourably on public authorities because they know that if they were to impose fines, but the £350,000 fine, which I articulated earlier, was the Ministry of Defence. So that was the first outing for the ICO to actually impose sanctions on a public related organisation. But the fines for private sector, you've probably seen in the news hundreds of times, have been very stark, very large figures. And indeed, when we talked about earlier about the cyber attacks on the local councils last week, I think it was 2 of those councils were actually hauled over the coals by the ICO because the breaches actually shouldn't have happened in terms of some of the data that was able to be got at by the hackers, and the ICO offered an opinion towards those councils which wasn't a particularly pleasant one. So it is, yeah, it's not movable. Sorry.
Okay.
Case then, Chair, a recommendation perhaps could be that we approach the ICO and request of them that they either ensure ring-fenced government funding for subject access request responses, or we point out we simply won't pay any fines because if they're not going to resource us to do it, we ain't going to do it. And maybe getting ahead of it to reduce risk might be something that's at the very least prudent, possibly inflammatory, maybe even draw attention to us. So I'll leave it for the more diplomatic people to resolve. But ultimately, just sort of sticking our head under the duvet is perhaps not the best approach.
Yeah, we can look at that at the end.
Well, just to come back on that point. So the ICO, in terms of national policy setting, they seek advice from local authorities, and we are actually at that at that table offering advice on what potential reviews might be. So that gives us the opportunity, but they're not, you know, they've got the mindset clear on what the expectations are for all the right reasons, from protecting the vulnerable. While
So they're not responsive to that suggestion.
Well, whether they're responsive to that suggestion or not, I'm not quite sure if that's actually been tabled. I'm not privy to that, but it may be something we could look at. But just to give the comfort that we are at the table trying to at least put our case forward about what the pressures are that we're under. So I think we're at the table, and I think we would have an influence on the overall decision. But at this stage, there's no going back on those.
There's no point in a recommendation, Chair, that would suggest the most severe or potentially concerning issues get priority, because there's not somebody who's in the highways team who's going to be responding to an adult social care subject access request. So one won't affect the other. So a prioritisation method isn't practically possible. And so ultimately, it either needs to be resourced properly or a more realistic set of expectations need to be set. And in short, whatever recommendation that officers are most empowered by is something I'd be happy to support, to make sure that you guys are enabled to see the targets met reasonably, the public supported properly, but similarly, what I don't want is the council to be vulnerable to the ICO and fined, because we're not resourced to provide this, and we have statutory services like adult social care, children's services that we do have to provide. It just seems to me that there needs to be an element of pragmatism here. But that's enough on that. My other question, Chair, was it was really down to the very beginning of this discussion. There were a lot of questions about the CQC report, about the response from them, about how we got to where we got to. And it's gotten very complicated. I just want to seek some clarity, really. Is the Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee, the Audit Committee, or this committee responsible for monitoring the specific issues relating to spending and value for money that were highlighted as concerns by the CQC?
I would say that is a very good question, and I think that I think that would have to be fleshed through. I would like to understand what the first outing of the CQC OSC next week is, to understand if that's addressed as part of that. If we consider the flavour of the CQC outcome, it was about ensuring, you know, resident service users are serviced correctly. From you know, an age of eternity regarding the risk report in front of you today, SRO 1 has always been the vehicle for understanding the council's finances, and SRO 4 has had a predominant focus on service delivery. So I'm not sure if that answers that question, but it may well be that the different OSCs need to take the similar approach in terms of where they see that sitting, in terms of who's going to push the buttons on the scrutiny of the financial element as opposed to the service delivery element, which may give better clarity and outcomes for residents.
Well, as pointed out by Councillor Healy in our earlier item, Chair, we had the situation where is asset rationalisation and staffing structure intrinsically linked? Ultimately, if you're going to deliver service and it's going to be timely, there's going to be a cost. Every builder will always tell you there's the triangle of cost, time and quality, and you can only ever have two of those three. So we can't have one without the other. The CQC committee is not a forevermore committee, so that will look at where we are and how we got here and how we move on, but it won't monitor this in future to make sure it never happens again. Ultimately, it does need to be monitored in future to make sure we never get a report like that again, and so the responsibility has to lie somewhere. And what I don't want to see is it fall through the gaps, or to see duplication, or to see redundancy. We don't want it either all covered twice or not covered at all. And so some clarity there from officers in terms of, from a risk report, what burden lies where and which area is responsible for what would be very useful in making sure that scrutiny as a wider area can function moving forward, or indeed maybe even audit, because there's potentially three committees that could do some, all. Is there a problem with it being divided? Would you then see a lack of knowledge perhaps? Is it better under one roof? There's a recommendation in there somewhere, Chair, but I'm not sure what it is. And I also have a third recommendation for later, but I'll shut up for now.
I look forward to that. As far as the CQC committees, commissioning is a big key area where we've been failing, and there's the intentions to recruit. So that's something that's going to take a little while. Exactly, it's going to take a while to recruit the right people, for them to get their heads around the issue and actually start making a difference. So there's time, again, is an issue on that one. But going back to SRO 1, you know, the very first bullet point on page 36, budget holders that are appropriately skilled to manage their budgets is flagged as a red issue. So it's not confined to adults, it's across the board in terms of do people have the skills to manage within their budget allocation? We've had a good result last year in terms of, but that was, as Andy said, that was about cost cutting rather than a strategic recosting of how we operate. So it will be on the radar, unless you want to add anything, Andy. Yeah.
There's a couple of points which might help clarify the sort of situation. So the CQC feedback specifically mentions our abilities around risk and the level of detail around risk around adult social care, so that there are recommendations there that will be dealt with in the recovery plan, which I think the relevant commission that we're setting up for CQC will look at. So this is an overview management scrutiny commission, isn't it? So what we're interested in is, and I think it's my earlier point, Councillor Meredith, is we need to improve the performance framework in adult social care that you see here, because I think that's a common theme that I've taken from quite a few of these commissions now. You need the right information to be able to scrutinise whether these issues are there or not. And it's clear that we need to improve that overall performance framework piece in adult social care. So at a kind of overview level, will improve the performance framework that sits with adult social care that you'll see as part of that. And of course, we can't ignore adult social care as a service at this commission because it's 2/3 of the council's spend. So it's a huge amount of money that we're spending anyway. So I think it's going to be dealt with in different levels. I think for me that the commission around CQC is very much about the detailed operational issues that need fixing. That's the recovery plan that the chair mentioned previously. But I think to stop it falling through the gaps here, which I think is a really important point, is we must improve our performance framework in how we measure that service, and that goes hand in hand with risk. So that is in the plan to be dealt with. So hopefully that won't happen.
Thanks, Andy. Yes, before I bring Councillor Redshaw in. You scrap that, okay. I just wanted to raise an additional. I'll bring you in next, Phil. Under SR 16, which is actually about recruitment and retaining staff, there's one red point, which is that performance reviews completion rate only 14.7%, against anything under 60% would be flagged as red, and we should be delivering 90%. That's one small bullet point on a strategic risk that is actually classed as amber. But to me, that raises fundamental questions about leadership and the culture in the organisation. If you're going to go through a fundamental process of change, then the vision and the actions that are needed to deliver that have to be cascaded down through the organisation, from director down to the lowest rung in the organisation. How on earth is that going to be communicated, and do we ensure delivery if only 15% of people are having an appraisal? In my view, and in most commercial organisations, appraisals would happen at the same time, beginning of a financial year normally, and be cascaded down through the organisation so that targets, objectives, and what an individual's role is in delivering that can be built into their appraisal. If we're not even appraising people, how on earth do they get the message of what their part and role is in changing the organisation? So I appreciate that's a bit of a googly, but from my point of view, it's fundamental to us actually delivering change.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, no, absolutely correct in my opinion. So we're moving forward in many different areas of the council at the moment, and one of the massive improvements that we're looking to make is around our performance kind of culture in general. So we've talked about performance measurement and KPIs, but there's also an individual performance element to that, and improving how we approach that. So yeah, Mr. Bellotti, obviously our incoming chief, has got quite a significant programme lined up around how we improve our ability to do performance management and measure individual performance in that. So that's happening now. The question of how do we do it better? So we've started this process already. So if we go back, which I think many of you were in attendance of, our Connected Council conference that took place about sort of 6 weeks ago, that was really the start and kicking off for the first 2 or 3 tiers of management in the organisation, being really, really clear about how we're going to work going forward. So yeah, we need to be much stronger on objectives, setting clear objectives for managers and for the people that work within the organisation. We need to be much stronger on measuring performance and these performance reviews. So this performance on this at the moment is not acceptable. It needs to improve. And then, we need to be looking at productivity, and we need to be really clear on how we become more productive. So we've started that exercise. There's another piece of work underway already now, looking at the definition and role of management. So we're going to be redefining, being really clear right from the top of the organisation through the management layers, what we expect of managers and how they're going to behave in the future. So there's quite a lot going to be happening in this space. We've started it. I completely agree with the question and the sentiment here. There's no way we're going to deliver full transformation unless we've got a much tighter grip on the organisational performance. So that is one of the biggest priorities of Mr. Bellotti at the moment.
Thank you, Andy. That's the right answer. We just need to see it delivered, don't we? Councillor Redshaw, please. Oh, sorry,
Thank you.
Mike, yeah.
Well, I just wanted to add, in the report, it specifies 14.7%, but perhaps we'll need to take a reflective look at that. We changed the rule set on the completion of performance reviews to be carried out through the full through the full financial year. So as this report is as of September, you would have expected potentially a third, 33% if you were looking at a proportionate basis. But so I think I'll either add a footnote to that particular key risk, and I'll speak to the risk coordinator, but that's not a reflective position because of that nature. If we're looking at proportionate position, it may be 33% at this report date.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Redshaw. Councillor Healy wants to wiggle on
Well,
this
just a
one.
very quick one
Yeah.
on that. I mean, Andy, you talk about ability to achieve transformation. Can we really achieve transformation when we've got a risk that budget holders are not skilled to manage budgets? I mean, it seems like a very basic thing, having managers who can manage budgets. We've got it as a red. Are you confident that we can achieve transformation when we've got people who lack the skills to do basic budget management?
Yes, thanks very much, Councillor. So yes, I am confident because we're putting these measures in place now. So Mr. Nielsen would, if he was here, would talk about the financial framework and that's been implemented now. There's a whole bunch of training activity happening with budget holders. It's a pertinent conversation in the senior leadership group at the moment. So we are going to do a lot of work on improving the role of budget holders and bring some better control around some of that. But essentially this point is critical to our success because we need to have a much stronger grip on the resources that we're deploying, and very much is that this is our main thrust of conversation at the moment with our new chief.
Thank you, Andy. I think we've exhausted the questions, thankfully. Can we try and round up what recommendations we're looking at? Sorry, before Richard, yeah, that's a good.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So members have talked a lot about how to engage scrutiny more in this risk management process. Fortunately, there's very clear professional guidance about how to do so from Centre for Governance of Scrutiny. I'll share this with members afterwards, but the long and short of it is the strategic risk register should be there to inform scrutiny topics. So it should be, say if we were talking about the health one earlier, that would be considered by health and wellbeing, children's, etc., etc. So I think if we're talking about how to accommodate it, that's the sort of structure we need to put in. Obviously we want to do that in a dynamic way, so we're not waiting months and months to get told that there's a risk. So I think obviously there's been discussion about where you'll accommodate strategic risk and how many times a year. If you're happy for us to go away and work out a process for us to do that, so it's your subcommittees and you're speaking to the relevant officers for each risk, that's what we can do. So if I'm happy for that.
Rather than the whole report coming to us every 3 months, maybe we focus on the red flag issues quarterly, and obviously some of these issues need to be forwarded to other committees for discussion. Like we said, the ICB, we should be asking HOSC to look at that on their schedule, for example. So we're happy to do that in our January workshop. Thanks, Rob. Anything else? There's some specifics on there. I don't know whether Councillor Meredith was serious about the SAR targets.
But those sorts of things are things you should be having dedicated scrutiny items on, rather than. I'd maybe let Councillor Meredith confirm how he considers those recommendations.
Unfortunately, he's not here. Yeah, so we'll move on.
Apologies, may I just address the committee? So in respect to the previous point regarding the flow through of, the specific monitoring of those elements and the wish to push those out to other committees, we have, in my opinion, we've tried that before, but because in the same way that we discussed earlier about the intrinsic link between certain risks, it's very difficult to disseminate the report. And it was my it would be my recommendation, which is why we now take this report through to Cabinet, which has got the portfolio holders on for each of the areas, that they then take out of that what they need to take out of it, rather than it be disseminated into different areas. But that was just my take on that.
I think maybe there's a conversation here we can have outside of the meeting, and then bring this back to the workshops with a agreed plan between officers, and then working that out how audit committee is going to involve in this and scrutiny. But I think there's certainly a place that members need to think about sharing these risks with the scrutiny committees, because if not, you're again making suggestions for scrutiny topics without the full information, which is what we spoke about previously in the performance report.
Yeah, I think that seems reasonable. Are we all happy with it? Andy? Welcome, Councillor Walker.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I'm still keen, though, to formalise the immediate route, which doesn't call in a whole scrutiny committee, but it Mike's idea of a suggestion of reporting via the portfolio holder, the relevant one, back to the chair, will give that immediate heads up. At the moment, there is no formal route for that. And if we could establish that, I think that's very positive.
Okay, Councillor Walker, thank you. Councillor Meredith, yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and thank God for YouTube. I had to step out quickly because a recommendation for today and then a recommendation for January's workshop, I think, have sort of come to my mind after the discussions. The recommendation for today, and in line with your comments about how serious I was regarding the subject access requests, it was more along the lines of the pragmatism and accuracy of reporting. And if we see 40% reached, 90% target, and then we see that 6 months ago, and we see that a year ago, and we saw that 18 months ago, something has to change. Either the practice has to change, or the target has to change, or our understanding of it has to change because of the reality of the situation. And of course, as Andy highlighted earlier as well, as data exercises and ways of actually accessing that are changing and being adapted and evolved and improved, then there will be a long-term plan as well as short-term action. With all that in mind, what I'd say is there needs to be a greater emphasis in future reports of this type, of this character, in terms of what's being done. So it says, for example, 40% approval. It's right, there is a long-term plan to change our accessibility of data. And in the short term, this is why it is the way it is. And what we would like is even a potential recommendation. I mean, Mike apologised for offering a recommendation earlier. I'm always grateful for it. We get to change policy. If officers need us to empower them, ask away. That's what councillors are here for, to enable the delivery of service and the officers to do their jobs. And so the recommendation I'd suggest, Chair, is that this report comes with those extra caveats in future, an explanation, a justification, and even a recommendation on what could be changed to enable improvements. And that's something, if we recommended that as a committee today for future reports, Councillor Tucker's recommendation that this comes every 3 months is effectively now obsolete, because we'll know it every 6 months and then we'll give them the time to implement it. And as you said, we only then need to check in on the red issues rather than the whole 200 topics that get rag rated. And there's a balance in between the two, which again is probably more considerate of officer time. And then with regards to the recommendation for January for the work programme, we've noticed at this committee that there's the business plan, the performance report and the strategic risk register. And this could go one of two ways with the level of depth we've gone into each subject in the October meeting and today. We could either see a proper coordination across them where one influences and evolves the other, or we could see, like back in the old Boofery and Humberside and Beverley Borough days, where you have a council that says, no, that's not my problem, mate, that's Humberside. And then the Humberside councillor goes, no, that's not my problem, mate, that's the borough councillor. And you never get to the bottom of any issue because it always falls under the remit of something that's not on the agenda that day. So a coordination when we set our work programme between the three would be incredibly useful to make sure that no matter what scattergun approach we take, we can actually get an answer to an issue, or we can get a recommendation to address a problem from the meeting, rather than going, oh, well, in October I was told to bring it up in December, and in December I was told I should have brought it up in October. If it's all at the same time, that problem goes away.
Thanks, Councillor Meredith. I think we can condense that down to a...
Sure.
I wanted to explain it, Chair, so that Rob can work his magic.
I think we need an AI software package just to edit Councillor Meredith, I think, probably.
I think if I had some intelligence, that might solve the problem, Chair, artificial or not.
I wouldn't like to say that, Richard. Okay. If Are we happy to let Rob put this into a sentence for our minutes?
I'd argue I've spoken less than usual
A
and
short-
most others, Chair.
A short paragraph. We'll compromise at a short paragraph. I think, as I say, I think most of this we'll have to square as part of our January workshops in terms of, because otherwise we're going to clog up our work schedule with just looking at strategic risks on an ongoing basis, and we've got a lot of other topics that we need to consider. So, are we happy with that as a close? Right. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you in 3 or 6 months. If not sooner. Thank you very much. Right, we've got some other matters just to wrap up at the end of the.
Thank.
By all means, Councillor Jeffries. Yeah, thank you for coming. Sorry. Yeah.
Members will be pleased to know I'm going to be very quick here. So
sorry, can we just have a bit?
Everything is set out as in your papers. It's only amendments to the health and wellbeing scrutiny's work programme. Members will be familiar that at the last meeting of council, that terms of reference was amended.
Councillor Sarabol, sorry. Can we just have a little bit of? Thank you.
So I'll be very, very brief. So that terms of reference for health and wellbeing was amended. So that's resulted in a rationalisation of its work programme. The changes are set out on the back of your committee notes. But it's the deferral of some items for the next work programme. I won't go through them all. And then the addition of 3 more items, 2 of them are pre-decision scrutiny, personal budget setting for residential care, and the council's prevention framework. Those business as usual council business, and then 1 respond to a consultation. But if there's any questions on them, I'm happy to pick them up.
Any questions on those changes? And Councillor Phoenix happy with those? Great. Councillor Haley.
Is there a work programme for the overview for the scrutiny OSC scrutiny committee? CQC.
So that's going to be determined at Tuesday's meeting.
So they're going to determine it themselves, are they?
So it's in the same process as all scrutiny. So it'll be determined by themselves. They'll put the draft forward, and then that'll come here. So
right. Okay. Thanks.
But the same with every single scrutiny committee. It's all member determined.
That meeting's next week on the 9th, when there will, and part of that will be setting the work programme for the year ahead. And then finally, we got the delegated authority issue.
Yeah, so there's 1 forward plan item at the back of your packet. It's fairly business as usual. It's just bringing that policy in line with our other policies, so executive directors can make minor amendments.
Are we all happy with that? Very good. In that case, I will close the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.